The Book of Deuteronomy, fully summarized. Our story begins in the 11th month of the 40th year in Israelites' journey. Moses spoke to the Israelites, saying, God has set the land before Israel for you to conquer and possess, because it was the land of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then the book tells of how Moses took wise and knowledgeable men from among the tribes and made them leaders over the people. He told them to judge righteously and bring difficult cases to him if such was necessary. Then, even though we just read all this in the previous book, Moses retells the story of how he sent 12 men, one from each tribe, to spy out the land to be conquered. But when they brought back the news, the people of Israel became afraid of the giants living there, and did not want to go up to retake the promised land. Moses told them not to be afraid because God would fight for Israel, as he did for them in Egypt. But they did not believe in God's power, and because of that the Lord was angry, and made it so that their generation would never see the promised land. God also punished Moses for their sakes, even though he didn't really do anything, but the people's children would still enter the promised land, in addition to Joshua and Caleb, who tried to encourage the people when they came back from scouting the land. Then Israel foolishly tried to defeat the Amorites without God's help, but they ran away like they were being chased by bees. Then Moses tells of how the Lord brought Israel throughout the wilderness and sustained them, and they came peacefully through the land of Seir, the descendants of Esau, who had already stolen the land from the Horites, and had God's favor, so they were not conquered by Israel. They bought food and water from the descendants of Esau, and then they were to cross peacefully through the Ammon, the descendants of Lot, who gained their land by having the Lord destroy the Zanzumin, the former inhabitants of it, who were giants. Then the Israelites passed over the valley of the Zered, and over time, after 38 years, all the men of the disobedient generation of Israel were consumed by the Lord, because his hand was against them. The Lord delivered King Sihon the Amorite into the hands of the Israelites, for Sihon did not let Israel pass through his land, even when Moses sent out his messengers to telling him that the Israelites came in peace, because the Lord hardened his heart so that God could put the fear of Israel in hearts all across the land. So Israel slaughtered every man, woman, and child in Heshbon and took the livestock as plunder with help of the Lord. And the Lord made the people of the earth fear Israel. Then God delivered Og, king of Bashan, into the hands of Israel. And with the help of the Lord, Israel killed every man, woman, and child in the city of Bashan, and kept the spoil for themselves, and also took the land from the 2 kings of Ammon and all their cities. By that point, Og, king of Bashan, was the only giant of the land remaining. Then the land that was conquered to the east of the Jordan was divided among the Israelite tribes, and Moses commanded that Israel was going to go and take back their land by force with the help of the Lord under their new leader Joshua. The tribes that had already received their own inheritance from the land conquered east of the Jordan would go up to fight as well, and Moses commanded Joshua to do the will of the Lord and utterly destroy all the kingdoms of the land that he was about to pass through. Unfortunately, Moses was still forbidden from entering the promised land, however, and begged the Lord to let him come to see it before he died. But God was being really bitter on account of the Israelites' disobedience and said, "Enough of that! Shame on you!" But God did say that Moses would be able to at least see the promised land from afar before he died. So now that we've gotten through 3 chapters worth of recap, let's actually get on with the story, maybe. Pretty please. Moses said to the Israelites that they needed to listen to God's law and go in and possess the land that God was giving them, and they shouldn't disobey or alter the law, for they had seen what happened when people follow other gods. They had to be careful to observe the law, for it was righteous and just, more so than that of any other nation, because it was inspired by God. And the Israelites had better be sure to teach their children and grandchildren to fear the Lord. They had heard him speak from the fire on the mountain, and they must not make any graven images, nor worship things of nature, for all things are from God. The Lord had taken the people out of Egypt for them to possess their land, because the Israelites were his inheritance. So do not disobey him and create art, for he is a jelly god and will kill your ass. I'm just going to switch to first person throughout this summary, by the way, if you guys are okay with that. A lot of this book is in the first person from Moses. And if you act corruptly and make false idols, you will perish and be scattered by the Lord among the nations. But if you repent, the Lord will not forsake you, for he is merciful, and you will be saved from the other nations that oppress you. For God has not sought out any other nation, and he revealed himself to you because he loves the Israelites, because you love him. And he has defeated nations before you much mightier than you, so keep his commandments. God has done everything for you, and he will not forget the covenant he made. The Lord showed you his great signs so you could believe in him, and he saved you with his divine power. There is no other like him. Then the chapter states how Moses set apart 3 cities of refuge for the accidental manslayer on the east of the Jordan, In the next chapter, Moses recaps the Israelites about how the Lord came down from Mount Sinai and made a covenant with them, and he accepted the original 10 Commandments from God on the mountain of fire. 1, don't worship other gods. 2, don't make graven images of God because he is a jelly God and will punish you for 4 generations. 3, don't take the Lord's name in vain. 4, observe the Sabbath and don't do any work on it. 5, honor your parents. 6, don't murder. 7, don't commit adultery. 8, don't steal. 9, don't bear false witness. 10, don't covet. These words were spoken and written on the tablets, and when the mountain was burning with fire, the Israelites were all afraid to go up with Moses because they thought that they would die. Moses received all the commandments, and the Israelites were commanded to obey them so that they would live long and prosper. The original tablets were broken, and Moses received different ones later, but whatever. God demanded that the Israelites follow his laws and not turn away from them, and they would live long and prosper. I feel like the Bible repeats stuff a lot. I know, crazy, right? Like, read through the Old Testament and take a shot every time God brags about freeing the Israelites from Egypt. You'll black out. He holds that one over their heads forever. The greatest commandment of all, according to God, though, was to fear the Lord and keep all of his other commandments for the people's own sakes. The people were to love God, and the Israelites were to hammer it into their children's heads that they had to obey God. Thus saith Moses, do not forget the Lord your God when entering the perfect land that he has given you, and that you have not made for yourselves. For he has brought you out of Egypt, and you will fear him and not worship idols. For God is a jelly God, and you will not tempt him, lest you be destroyed. And you will drive out the peoples before you, and keep his commandments, and tell your children of the mighty signs performed in Egypt by God, so that they will fear God and believe. Then Moses really goes off the rails and repeatedly states very vehemently that the Israelites must go into the land of their possession and utterly destroy all the nations before them and slaughter every single person in them, using the power of God, showing no mercy and making no peace, lest they corrupt the Israelites. Thus saith Moses, do not take their idols and their altars and sacred pillars for yourselves, lest the Lord set his wrath upon you and destroy you, but instead destroy everything in your path without mercy, for you are God's holy people, and a treasure on the earth to him, superior to all the rest, not because of your strength, but because of your holiness towards him, and his covenant with you. So keep all of God's commandments, for he loves those who love him, but kills those who hate him. And he is a faithful God, looking out for the ones who are his people. So if you keep God's commandments, when you get to the promised land, he will greatly reward you and maintain his covenant with your forefathers. And you will have much food in the land. Disease, famine, and barrenness will be completely wiped out, just like the peoples of the land that you will wipe out without a hint of pity. Do not be afraid of them, even if they are stronger than you, for you have God on your side, who has great power, and also murder hornets, and will aid in your conquest, as he showed when he destroyed the Israelites. But they will not be destroyed all at once, but gradually instead, so the livestock belonging to the people would not become too much to handle at once. God will make sure that they are all destroyed, and he will deliver them into your hand, and no one will be able to stand against you. You must observe every commandment God has given you, for he has led you all through the wilderness to test what was in your heart, even though he already knew because he is supposed to be omniscient. And 1 Kings said that he knows the hearts of men. You, Israel, eating manna in the desert, realize that man lives and dies by the word of God, and you were preserved by God for 40 years. Can't say the same about your parents, though, all of whom got consumed by God. And now God brings you into a great land where nothing to speak of is scarce, and you will lack of nothing, a land flowing with milk and honey. So always remember that God is responsible for all things, and you must bless him. And if you do forsake him because you foolishly believe in your own power over his or follow other gods, you will surely perish for your infidelity, like the other nations destroyed around you. You are about to cross over the Jordan River, Israel, to destroy the nations before you with the help of God, the all-consuming fire, without whom you would be nothing. But do not think the Lord is helping you because you are righteous, even though a few chapters ago the Lord said that you were holy, but because the nations before you are unrighteous, for you are stiff-necked and have constantly provoked the Lord in rebellion against him. The Lord was going to destroy every single one of you squirts for your corruption, and create a new nation loyal to him from my seed. I went up to the mountain to receive the stone tablets of God's covenant, and ate no food or water for 40 days, somehow. And when I came down from the mountain to see you all worshipping your golden calf, I got so mad that I broke the original stone tablets that I had carried down the mountain to you. I went back up to the mountain and begged God to spare you, and yet you kept provoking the Lord to wrath and rebelling against him. Damn you! You are so rebellious. I had to keep prostrating myself to the Lord because he was so angry at you that he was going to kill every single one of you. But I reasoned with him and reminded him of his covenant, and the fact that killing all of his people would give him a bad reputation. So he did not kill you all after I stayed on top of the mountain for 40 more days again. I got the new stone tablets after going up and having them written in by God on top of the mountain. You know, the ones with the commandment about not boiling baby goats in their mother's milk, and I put the goat tablets in the Ark of the Covenant. Then, after journeying a while, the Lord set apart the Levites to bear the Ark of the Covenant with tablets in it, and to bless the Lord, and they were given no inheritance. #justice for Levites. You must fear the Lord with all your heart, and circumcise your heart, so to speak, and no longer be stiff-necked, for God gives perfect justice to the poor and the strangers. Except for all those strangers he commands you to slaughter to reclaim the Holy Land. So praise him unquestioningly for all the amazing things he has done and walk in his ways. You must also care for the poor and unfortunate among you, except for, the poor and unfortunate you're about to slaughter when going into the Holy Land and clearing it out. You, the children of Israel, have seen the glory of the Lord's work done against those who have opposed you, and you will now go into the promised land where milk and honey flow and everything is plentiful due to God's watchful grace. If you obey God's commandments, he will sustain you, but if you turn away from him and serve other gods, the Lord will turn against you, and the land will dry up and die. So take these words to heart, and teach your descendants to fear the Lord, that they may prosper. The Lord will drive out the nations before you, and no one will be able to stand before you. And you will possess the land, taking it from mightier nations than yourselves. The Lord will make all the land fear you because of your conquest, but you must obey God's commands. And if you do not and go after other gods, you will have your blessings no more. You must completely destroy all of the places of worship in the nations that you dispossess, including all the altars and heathen images, and only worship God and sacrifice to him in the prescribed places in each of the tribes. You will obey God and set up the altars where he tells you to, and there you will offer up all your burnt offerings. I mean, what do you think this is? Anarchy? You can't just go giving people religious freedom, come on. However, you do have some freedoms, like you are allowed to slaughter and eat meat wherever you want, and whenever you want, and how much you want, because screw the vegans, and there is a surplus of livestock. However, don't ever drink blood, and only ever offer it to God, the vampire bat, in a creepy occult-like rituals, and pour it on the ground. And for goodness sake, don't forsake the Levites among you who have no inheritance. #justice for Levites. Bottom line, don't serve the gods of other nations who sacrifice their children in the fire, and always follow God's commandments, for anything outside of them is an abomination. If there is a false prophet who compels you to seek out other gods, you must not listen to him, for the Lord is testing you to see if you are truly loyal to him or not. That prophet will surely be put to death, and if there is anyone you know who tries to entice you to serve other gods, you should not listen to him, and must take him out and have the congregation stone him to death, so Israel will see and not follow his example. And more so, if a city worships other gods, then all the inhabitants in the city will be slaughtered by the sword, as well as their animals, and all their possessions will be taken, and all of the city will be burned. And if you do this, you are right and just in the merciful Lord's eyes. You are children of God, so don't shave your heads, and don't eat any unclean animals, which, this chapter again lists all of the things the Israelites were able to and not able to eat. Isn't a lot of stuff in this book just from the 3 previous books? Why are we going through it again? Oh, and the book once again makes the mistake of referring to bats as birds. Anyway, continuing. Don't boil your goats in their mother's milk, and always pay your tithes, so that the poor and widows will eat of them and be satisfied. And also the Levites, because they have no inheritance. #justice for Levites. Every 7 years you will release any debt that your fellow man is supposed to pay to you, but you may still require payment from foreigners. In fact, never borrow from foreigners, only lend to them, and also sell them dead animal carcasses. Be generous to the poor and accept them, and do not be cruel, lest you anger God. And you will be blessed by the Lord for your kindness if you happen to provide for their needs. There will always be poor people among you, so it is your duty to reach out your hand and help them. If a Hebrew man sells himself to you, release him in the 7th year, and send him back with some of your flock. However, if your servant wishes to stay with you, thrust a freaking spike through his ear to mark him as your servant forever. Okay. Consecrate all of the firstborn of your flock to God. Do not use it for any labor, and do not sacrifice it to God if there is any defect in it. And you and your household must eat it in the place of the Lord's choosing, but do not eat its blood. Then the next chapter again goes over the 3 feasts of the Lord that are to be kept, where all the males of Israel would come up to the Lord in his chosen place and make offerings to him as they were able to. The feasts, of course, included the Passover of unleavened bread, #God hates yeast, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of the Tabernacles. And I really don't feel like going over all the details of how they were to be celebrated again. Moses continues, saying, "You must appoint just judges and officers who will not show partiality or take bribes, but you will follow what is altogether just. You will not construct a graven image or plant a tree near the altar of the Lord, because God hates those, and you shall not sacrifice to God anything with any blemish in it. If anyone is discovered worshipping another god, they will be taken out and stoned by the congregation. And whoever deserves death will only have to be condemned by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses to be stoned. And if a case is too difficult to judge, merely consult the priests, the Levites, and the judges, and follow the sentence they pronounce on the guilty. Do not turn away from it, because those who question the conclusion of a priest, judge, or minister will be put to death, and so the evil will be cleansed from the land, and all will fear the Lord. And when you set a king to rule, you do not take one from the foreigners, but choose the one that God chooses from amongst your brethren. I mean, come on, guys, do you even know the first thing about forming an ethno-nationalist theocracy? He must be righteous and selfish, and will write down the law in a book and read it continually in order to more effectively fear the Lord, and he will make Israel prosper. The priests and the Levites will have no inheritance, #justice for Levites, so they will be due food offerings from the people for their work in serving God. The first fruits shall be the priest's due from the people, as well as whenever anyone comes up to offer a sacrifice. You must avoid the wicked customs of other lands, for they are an abomination to God, and you must drive out those who follow other customs. You must never sacrifice your children in fire, or practice witchcraft, or sorcery, or divination. Also, after I die, God will raise up another prophet like me to speak to you in my name, and you will be able to tell if he is really my prophet, if his prophecies actually come true. But if they do not, and he says to serve other gods, he is not my prophet, and he shall be executed. You shall make 3 cities of refuge in the land that the Lord has cut out of the other nations, where an accidental manslayer will flee to escape the wrath of their avenger. If the Lord enlarges your territory, you will make 3 more cities of refuge. But if someone kills his fellow man in anger, I'm talking premeditated murder here, he will be taken up to the avenger of blood to be killed, with no mercy. Don't move landmarks. 2 or 3 witnesses must be present to condemn a man, and if anyone is a false witness, then they will be killed, and you will not pity him, for the law is eye for an eye, and life for life. When you go out to war, do not be afraid, because God is with you. But before a battle, the officers will say to the people that anyone who has unfinished business, like, say, building a house, planting a vineyard, or getting married, or is just a pansy, should not go into battle. When you come up upon a city, try to make peace with it, and if they accept your terms, subjugate the people, and have them serve you and offer you tribute. But if they do not accept, and try to fight you, kill every male within the city, and take all the livestock, women, children, riches, and produce for yourselves. However, that is only for people outside the Holy Land, to be clear. For cities within the Holy Land, you must make absolutely sure to destroy everything. If it breathes, kill it, lest the gods of the foreigners tempt you and to abandon your traditions and serve other gods. Also, don't destroy the trees that bear fruit, but the ones that don't are totally fair game for cutting down. If anyone is found to be murdered and nobody knows who done it, the elders of the city closest to the slain man will take a heifer down to the valley of flowing water and break its neck. The elders will wash their hands, saying that they had not shed any blood, and then the case will be settled because the blood of the innocent man has been repaid with that of a heifer's blood.
That makes sense!
When you go out to war and win and take female captives, you may take a beautiful woman as your wife without consent and bring her back to your house. Then you're supposed to shave her hair and trim her nails, and after you let her mourn her parents for a month, you can have sex with her. But if she doesn't get your mighty rod going, you will not sell her for money, and you will set her free. Also, if you have 2 wives but only love one, you still need to give the double portion of your inheritance to the firstborn of your unloved wife, if he is born first. Daughters don't get squat, of course. Also, has this ever happened to you? You have a rebellious teen who won't listen to you? Well, just take him over to the elders of the city and have the congregation stone him to death, so no other children will think twice about disobeying their parents. Don't leave the body of a hanged person rotting on a tree. Always return anything that your brother lost back to him, and care for your brother's donkey and ox. A woman who wears men's clothing and vice versa is an abomination because God hates trans people. When you steal eggs or chickens from a nest, let the mother go. Build sturdy housing, never mix anything together ever, and make tassels. And if a man falsely accuses his wife of not being a virgin, he shall pay a fine of 100 shekels to the woman's father, and he shall never divorce her. But if a man's new wife is indeed found not to be a virgin, she will be dragged before the door of her father's house and stoned to death by the congregation like the whore she is. If a man lies with a married woman, then they will both be put to death. If a man rapes a married woman, only the man will be put to death. But if a man rapes a virgin, he need only pay a fine of 50 shekels to her father, and she will be his wife, and they cannot get a divorce. Ever. Also, a man cannot take his father's wife as his own. Also, some people are not able to enter the assembly of the Lord, including the disabled, guys with their dicks cut off, those of illegitimate birth to the 10th generation even, or the Moabites or the Ammonites, also to the 10th generation because of their offenses against Israel. But the Edomites and the Egyptians may enter the assembly in the 3rd generation. Also, no one who is unclean may come into the campsite, and all must poop outside the campsite and cover it afterwards, because the Lord will be walking amongst you. And you really think he wants to see and or smell that? If a slave runs away, don't return him to his master, but let him dwell with you, and you will not oppress him. All prostitutes and homosexuals are an abomination to the Lord, and they will have no place in Israel. You may only charge interest to foreigners and not Israelites. You will pay your vows to the Lord, and you can pretty much eat whatever you want from your neighbor's vineyard and grain field. Just don't take it to go. This ain't a drive-thru. Any man who is displeased with his wife can divorce her, and if she had not had sex with him yet, she can remarry, but she cannot remarry if she is no longer a virgin. Then a bunch more miscellaneous laws are given. It's just a bunch of miscellaneous laws for a good long while. Here's a thought. Why weren't all the miscellaneous laws just concentrated in one book together? Wouldn't that have made more sense than scattering them all over books 2 to 5? Anyway, thus saith Moses, don't work if you are recently married. Kidnappers will be put to death. Heed the advice of the priests in the event of a leprosy outbreak. I guess there are no doctors in ancient Jewish society. Return any pledge given to you when you lend money. Don't oppress your servants or any of the poor. Fathers can't be punished for the sins of their sons and vice versa. Wait, hold on. We just heard how bastards and some foreigners are forbidden from going to church for 10 generations, whatever. Give your leftover yield to the poor. If the wicked deserve to be beaten, then beat them. 9 out of 10 judges recommend 40 blows. And don't muzzle oxen. If a man dies with no children, his brother will take his wife as his own to preserve his lineage. But if he refuses to do this, he will be spat on and have his shoe taken by the widow of his brother. Wow, that is really tame by Old Testament standards. If a woman grabs another man's testicles, her hand will be cut off. Okay, now that's more like it. You will not make dishonest measurements, ever! And, when you are given some free time, go and destroy the Amalekites, because God doesn't like them. When you come into the promised land, you will take the first of the fruit of the ground as a tithe, and give it to the priest, and you will rejoice because the Lord took your ancestors out of Egypt, and now he has brought you to the wonderful land of milk and honey. The priest will give the tithe to the poor and the strangers, and the Levites who still have no inheritance, #justice for Levites. And you will pray to God to bless the people of Israel. Know that you are God's special people, and should be careful to obey all his statutes and commandments, and praise him continuously, for he has set Israel on high above the other nations. Then Moses, with the elders of Israel, commanded the people to keep the commandments, and told them to write down the law on the stones when they got to the promised land. Thus saith Moses, once you cross the Jordan, you will set up these stones on Mount Ebal, and shall also set up a stone altar to praise the Lord, and burn animal flesh on it. But you will not use an iron tool because of reasons, and you will make offerings to the Lord and obey him. Then Moses, the priests, and the Levites spoke to Israel, and told them to obey everything the Lord had commanded them. Moses proclaimed that in the future, on Mount Ebal, the Levites would say to all the men of Israel that anyone who makes a graven image, is disrespectful to their parents, moves a landmark, makes the blind wander, perverts justice, gives in to any kind of incest or bestiality, attacks his neighbor, takes a bribe to kill someone, or does not follow the law is cursed, and the people will say Amen. Then Moses saith, if you obey God, you will be set on high and receive blessings in all things, and the Lord will destroy your enemies before you. The Lord will establish you as a holy people to himself, and all the peoples of the land will recognize you and be afraid of you. And you will have treasure and lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail, so do not follow other gods. But then chapter 28, verses 15 to 68, spends 2 entire pages listing out all the excessive, disgusting, horrible punishments that will be dished out if the Israelites disobey God, like being forced to eat your own babies. And I honestly don't feel like describing this edgelord crap. You just have to go and read the baby-eating madness for yourself. Continuing, Moses then called all of Israel and told them to remember all the horrors that God brought upon the Pharaoh of Egypt, saying, the Lord has brought you unharmed through the wilderness and sustained you for 40 years, and destroyed your enemies before you. And now you stand before the Lord your God, all of you, and enter into a covenant with him, so that he can establish you as his possession, just as he promised. So let there not be anyone of the congregation who turns away from the Lord and follows the gods of other nations, for you have all seen the abominations that they practice. Do not go your own way rather than the way of God, for the Lord will not spare you, and will unleash every single curse listed in the previous chapter upon you. You will be blotted out from the face of the earth, and if the whole of Israel sins, then it will be destroyed with fire and brimstone, just as Sodom and Gomorrah were. And the other nations will be stunned at how utterly destroyed the land is, because you have forsaken God. So pretty please, follow the law, MK. If you follow the Lord with all your heart and soul and listen to his word, the Lord will have compassion on you, and will gather you all together to fight against all the other nations. He will bring you to the promised land and multiply you and circumcise your heart, metaphorically, at least I hope, and the curses that were once put upon you will be put upon your enemies. Your children will love God and be merry, and God will make you prosperous if you obey his laws. God has put before you the choice of either life or death. If you follow his law and love him, you will be blessed and will possess the land that he promised you. While if you turn away from him and serve other gods, you will surely perish. So choose now with heaven and earth as my witness, and I do so hope you choose God. I am 120 years old and about to keel over, so listen to me now. The Lord will cross over the Jordan with you and destroy the nations before you. So be strong and do not fear, for the Lord is with you. Joshua will be your new leader, and the Lord will deliver the nations to you as your possession. Moses told Joshua to be strong and that God was with him, and he wrote down the law in a book. Moses had the priests and Levites put it in the ark, and he told them to have it read to Israel every 7 years at the Feast of the Tabernacle, so that they would not forget it and would know to fear the Lord. And this was to be done as long as Israel resided in the land. Then the Lord made a prediction that Israel would rebel against him and cheat on him with other gods like a bunch of whores. Thus saith the Lord, many troubles will befall them, because I will forsake them in anger, as they will forsake me and break my covenant. So I am giving you this song that you may write down and sing to Israel when they get to the promised land, to testify against them, so that they will not forget me. I know their behavior long before they do it, as I am omniscient. So Moses wrote down the song of the Lord and inaugurated Joshua, son of Nun, as the new leader of Israel. After that, he commanded the book of the law to be put in the Ark of the Covenant by the Levites, and then he roasted the Israelites, saying that they were super rebellious and were going to get super corrupted after he died. Then Moses spoke the song of the Lord to the assembly, saying, Hear, O heavens, for I proclaim God's name, for he is justice and truth, and he is perfect. But this is a perverse generation, and they are foolish. For the Lord caused all things to be, and has created and led the nation of Israel, and has given them great nourishment. Jacob is the Lord's own inheritance, and the apple of his eye. There was no foreign god with him, and God provided for him and all his people. But you, Israel, grew fat and lazy, and forsook God, and sacrificed to demons and other gods. And so the Lord abandoned you, because you made him jelly, and you had no faith in him. So he desired to burn you in the lowest hell, the babies and the old men alike, where all kinds of horrifying disasters will be brought upon you. And the book lists in very gruesome detail, because you did not believe, and you were devoid of counsel, and you know nothing, like Jon Snow. And you are clothed in wickedness, so God will have vengeance against you. The day of your calamity will come, but he will have compassion on those who serve him, but will say to those who abandoned him, Where are your gods now, MK? For I am the one true God, and cause all wounds and healings. I am the author of life and death. I am eternal, and destroy all those who go against me with swords and arrows. And I will be the avenger of blood! So Moses told the people not to make light of this song and follow the law, because their life hung in the balance. Then Moses was sent up by the Lord to Mount Nebo in the land of Moab to die, because even though he was so incredibly faithful to the Lord, he just didn't do the magic trick right in Zin. Clearly, such an act is unforgivable. But he was unable to see the promised land from the top of the mountain. Before he went up, though, he gave a final blessing on Israel and told them of God's greatness, and complimented all of the 12 tribes of Israel, kind of weirdly, and said that the tribe of Joseph had horns like a unicorn. I'm not going to go through all of them. It actually reminds me a lot of Israel's goodbye to his sons at the end of Genesis. Moses even calls the tribe of Dan a lion's whelp again, and he told them all how God regards each of them greatly, including the Levites. #justice for Levites. Moses stated again that there was no God like the Lord who would thrust out their enemies before them with superior thrusting, and they would be happy in him because he was their shield and refuge, and would save them from their enemies. Then Moses went up to the mountain, saw all of the promised land, and died. The people buried him in the land of Moab and cried for him for a whole 30 days. His replacement Joshua was full of wisdom, so the people heeded him. But a prophet like Moses, who saw God face to face, had not ever arisen in Israel since. The end.